Swayam Prabha. Digital India. Educated India.
Today you will study about the linkages between environment and economic growth. As in the very beginning I made a statement that development is must, but environment is first. So, now you have to know the relationship between development and environment. We know for eradication of poverty, for improving our living conditions, we must do development, but at the same time we have to protect our environment. So, how to achieve sustainable development while maintaining our ecology and environment is a big challenge before us. Today you will study this relationship in terms of environmental coordinate curve, which is a hypothesis developed by environmental economist taking an idea from a famous economist view on inequality and economic development. So, Coordinate developed a hypothesis that with the increase in economic development, inequality increases. So, taking this idea, environmentalists try to establish the relationship between economic growth and environment degradation. We know the environment is very vital for supporting our life. It also absorbs the waste which we release into the atmosphere by way of doing production and consumption, and also it provides us various kinds of resources inputs which are used in the production process. Over the last 30 years, here has been an increasing concern about the effect of economic activity on environment. Economic growth has caused serious environmental damage, and therefore, how to achieve a sustainable economic growth is a major issue before the environmental economist. The current state of environment will certain future will constrain the future development. So, as we know that the way the process of development is going on, it is putting more strain, more pressure on our environment, and that is leading to the loss of many environmental resources, and that is why our future growth stake may be affected due to the way we are utilizing our environment. So, poor in developing countries are often dependent on natural environment for their livelihood and existence. So, especially in the developing countries, most of the poor people, they draw their livelihood, they draw food, fodder, fuel from the environmental resources. So, if environmental resources are degraded, then most sufferer would be the poor people who are getting their livelihood based on the environmental resources. So, damage to the environment and the relationship between environment and economy are more relevant, especially for developing countries. I am not saying that these things are not relevant for developed countries. In developed countries, there are different kinds of issues related to environment degradation, but for developing countries, poverty, unemployment and livelihood, these are the major concerns which must be examined in relation to the economy and environment. So, if you look at the environment and economic activity, then you will know that environment provide us 4 kinds of functions. First is life support, second is supply of natural resources, third is absorption of waste products, and fourth is supply of amenity services. And these 4 functions can also be interpreted in terms of 4 kinds of goods and services which are provided by the environment. First category is supporting services, second category is regulating services, and third is assimilative capacity or regulating services, and fourth is cultural services. So, these services are very very important for our lives, for our livelihood, for our survival, and these will be discussed in detail in the coming lectures. The environment provide a biological, chemical and physical system that enable human life to exist. So, that is a kind of support system that is provided by the environment. The system may include like our atmosphere, river systems, fertility of soil and diversity of plant and animal life. So, all these supportive systems of the environment help us to survive our lives and to sustain our livelihoods. These environmental goods and services are used by the households and they are very very essential to our life. From this diagram you can see the interrelationship between the economy and environment. We can divide the economy into 2 sectors, one is actually the production sector and other is the consumption sectors. And when we produce certain kinds of goods and services, we also release certain waste. So, we get the resources from the environment which are used as an input in the production process, and when we produce the final products we also produce the bad product, and these bad products are absorbed by the environment, and that is called assimilative capacity of environment. But I would like to mention here that this assimilative capacity of environment is not infinite. There is a limit to assimilative capacity, and therefore, if we are releasing more waste product into the atmosphere, then it becomes very difficult for the environmental system to absorb the waste. For example, if we are releasing certain kind of waste into the river system, so it is a characteristic of the river that river can clean itself up to a certain extent, but if you are releasing more waste into the river, then river may become sewer. So, therefore, the function of river to clean itself may be badly affected. So, that is why you should know that this assimilative of capacity of environment or absorption capacity of environment is not absolute, not infinite, it is limited. Similarly, we get many mineral resources, energy resources which are used as raw material for production process, and sometimes we also get directly certain kind of services or products which are directly consumed by the household sectors. So, household sector and production sector, these are the 2 main sectors of the economy which represents the entire economy, and when we consume certain kind of product, we release certain waste. Waste may be liquid waste, waste may be solid waste, waste may be gaseous waste, and these waste are absorbed by the environment which is known as assimilative capacity of environment. Similarly, environment also provide us various kind of biodiversities, and biodiversities also affect our survival, affect our livelihood. If biodiversity is declining due to over extraction of our natural resources, then many activities which are depending upon the biodiversity may be badly affected. Take an example of agriculture. So, if agriculture biodiversity is affecting, monoculture is going on, that will also affect our soil and water resources. So, this linkage can be established. I am again explaining this, that we have one side the environment which provide 4 kinds of functions. On the other side we have our economy which is represented by the production and consumption. And as we know, why do we produce the goods? Obviously to consume the goods. So, we cannot stop production, we cannot stop consumption. Then what can we do? We can produce the goods with better technology, with better management practices, with better conservation of resources. So, here comes the role of efficiency, productivity, etc. So, how to do our production with efficient manner, that can be studied in environmental economics. Similarly, consumption, consumption cannot be stopped, but what we can do is we can follow better consumer practices. Use and throw culture cannot be adopted by us, and if we are preserving our resources, making a better practice of in terms of both production and consumption, we can save the environment. So, this interface between environment and economy can be established by this graph, like raw material extraction, environmental functions are done, and similarly pollution waste are absorbed by the environment, and at the same time environment also provides certain kinds of goods and services to our production and consumption sectors. Now, we can understand that the kind of resources which we get from the environment, they can be classified into 2 categories. One is renewable resources and others are non-renewable resources. Non-renewable resources are those resources whose supply once used cannot be augmented. So, stock of these kind of resources are fixed, but renewable resources can be renewed. But here if we are extracting our renewable resources at the rate more than their regeneration, then these renewable resources may also be disappear. So, one point is clear here, although some of the resources are renewable in nature, but they do not have unlimited capacity to renew. So, therefore, we have to make a proper balance between our basic needs and also the environmental needs in terms of its capacity to regenerate itself. Some waste which are released by us into the atmosphere cannot be safely disposed of. Even some waste cannot be even disposed at all, like radioactive materials, heavy metals. So, if we are releasing such kind of waste into the atmosphere, then they cannot be absorbed by the environment. Even environment may take hundreds of years to absorb them. So, therefore, waste absorption capacity of environment is not infinite. Environment also provide us various kind of amenity and cultural services like recreation, education, etc. Many scientific advancements are based on the insights received by them from the nature, like Newton law. When a scientist is looking that on the nature on apple, then he falling at the soil, he get the inspiration to develop this law. So, many educational knowledge, scientific laws are also get some insights from the nature. So, nature provide beauty. Many poets write poem after looking at the beautiful nature, forest, rivers, etc. So, these are called amenity services. These functions of environment providing services and goods to the economy are competitive as well as complementary in nature. Some functions are competitive. Take an example, excessive discharge of waste material into the ocean will reduce their capacity to produce habitat for fish stock. So, the function is competitive. Similarly, We can also take the complementary functions of the environment, like appropriate forestry policies can provide a sustainable source of timber and reduce soil erosion. So, that kind of function is complementary function. So, I can again emphasize that the goods and services which are provided by the environment in terms of various functions, they can be classified into competitive as well as complementary. Now, let me discuss in detail the relationship between economic growth and environment. You know, high economic growth may lead to depletion of non-renewable resources. Now, in regard of economic growth and environment relation, there are different views. One view is that when there is a high growth of the economy and the economy is using non-renewable resources to produce goods or services, then according to market principles, if market operate efficiently, we in economics believe a competitive market. So, if there is a competitive market and if the depletion of non-renewable resources occurs, in that case if market operate efficiently, then there would be scarcity of these resources, and when scarcity occurs for these resources, then prices of these resources will go up, and when prices increases, cost of production will go up, and when cost of production go up, then it will lead to a change in the economic behavior. So, it will provide an incentive to the producers to explore certain kinds of alternatives, and this is the way how in any economy different methods of productions are evolved, different technologies are evolved because of scarcity of certain resources. So, main implication of this argument is that when the prices of these product increases due to the scarcity of these resources, then the direct consumption of these resources may fall. So, direct consumption of non-renewable resources due to this may fall, number one. Second is the use of higher priced non-renewable resources in production will decline through substitutions towards techniques of production that are less intensive in these inputs. Look at any product today, most of the product which are being manufactured, they are less energy intensive, they have less material content. So, that is due to the scientific advancement. So, scientific advancement, research and development is leading to the development of new sources of energy, new sources of production methods, or new exploration of oil fields, gas fields, etc., and increasing the supply of alternative resources, and then consequently the price of the scarce resources will come down. Higher prices will also encourage the development of new technologies that provide substitute for scarce resources. So, the argument here is that due to high growth of the economy, demand for resources will increase, their prices will increase, and that will encourage research and development, leading to the new technological change in our production, even in consumption also, like we can also use new methods of our consumption and save certain products or make a better use of our available products. This is one argument, and therefore, the supporter of economic growth, they argue that the contribution of economic growth to environmental degradation is overestimated. So, they are critical that high growth rate may not necessarily be responsible for the environmental degradation, and those who argue that high growth rate would lead to environmental degradation, they overestimate the adverse consequences of economic growth on environment. They argue that economic growth releases more resources which can be used to reduce environmental degradation. I can elaborate a bit this argument, that when we have a high economic growth would lead to increase government resources. Even if the tax GDP ratio remain constant, government would be able to have more resources, and these resources can be used by the government to protect the environment. World Bank is supportive to this argument that high growth of the economy would lead to better environmental protection. So, this is one argument, but as in the first lecture I also stated that there is another view as far as the relationship between economic growth and environmental protection is concerned, and that is a view by environmentalists, those who believe in preservation of nature. They think that there should be a limit to the growth. So, excessive growth may lead to environmental degradation, but third view is that we have to achieve the sustainable growth by making a proper balance between economic growth and environments. Grossman and Kruger in 1995 suggested that in the early stages of economic development the level of environmental degradation increased, but after this phase of environmental conditions improved with economic development, and that is I will discuss in later on, that is what is known as environmental coordinate curve, which I will take in detail later on. But this is also one argument that when economic growth increases in the initial stage of economic development, environmental degradation will increase, but after a critical level of income, that is called threshold income level, environmental protection start increasing or environmental degradation start declining, or environmental conditions improve with the increase in economic growth. But we have a huge cost of economic growth on environment, and many economists argue that economic growth is necessary for achieving greater human welfare, but at the same time economic growth also affect our natural resources, and therefore most important aspect here is how the growth is generated, how the growth is distributed. So, growth per se is not an idea that growth may not necessarily lead to environmental degradation or environmental protection, that depend upon how we are generating the growth and how we are distributing this growth. If growth is coming from most polluted industries, obviously that kind of growth would have adverse impact on our ecology and environment. That is why now economists are thinking beyond growth, because growth is a quantitative improvement in the economic condition of the country, but that quantitative increase in our GNP or GDP may not necessarily lead to a better living condition, better environment. That depend upon how this GDP is affecting our air and water qualities, generating solid waste into the economy, etc., and whether the growth is coming from green sources or grey sources, that is also the important when we try to establish the relationship between economic growth and environment. So, therefore, environmentalists challenge this unlimited growth which is being propagated by a group of economists to achieve certain goals of poverty, unemployment and living conditions, etc. To them, continued growth of output and population will eventually lead to loss of many species of flora and fauna. So, that is why they argue that effluent reduces effluence. This is also a kind of statement that can be elaborated. Effluent means pollution, pollution reduces effluence means prosperity. So, population pressure on our natural resources, then high growth rate of industrialization, urbanization, they all generate pollution, and pollution also affect our affluence, also affect our prosperities, because if pollution level increases, then health of the people will also be badly affected, our water bodies will be badly affected, our air will be badly affected, and that will be a huge cost on our lives. So, therefore, argument is made that effluence reduces effluence. I can explain the trade off between environment objective and economic growth by using these two graphs. In the first graph, you will see that on horizontal axis time is taken as a variable, and on vertical axis we are taking GNP in log. Log is taken in order to smooth the data, and two growth paths are shown in the graph. One is high growth path and second is low growth path. So, a country can follow a different kind of strategies to achieve the economic growth. One strategy may be that a low growth path over a period of time may be followed by any economy or high growth path. So, now after looking at the first graph showing the growth path high and low along with time, if you use these two growth paths and take on vertical axis log of index of environmental objectives and time is taken as it is, then you will find that initially up to a certain time period the low growth path would be generating less pollution in the economy. So, environmental protection would be high as compared to high growth path up to a certain time period if we are following low growth path. But if a certain time period is crossed, then the high growth path would be generating better environmental conditions as compared to low growth path. So, obviously, this graph can also be interpreted in the same manner as environmental coordinate curve hypothesis interpreted, that in the initial time period in the stages of economic growth, low growth path of GDP in any country would be a better option in terms of environmental protection, but over a longer period it is a high growth path which would generate better environmental conditions in any economy. I will take it in detail when I will explain the environmental coordinate curve. But when we had these two growth paths before us, now which path should we choose for our economy? That actually depend upon rate of time discount for environmental purity compared with GNP. In economics we use the discount rate. We discount our future incomes at the current period or current time. So, now if rate of time discount for environmental protection or environmental quality is lower than the rate of discount of our GDP, then it would be desirable that a high growth path would lead to better environmental protection in the long run, because we know that marginal utility of consumption declines with the rising income. So, when we discount our GNP, future GNP at a discount rate, we have to keep in mind that marginal utility of consumption decline with rising income. So, therefore, discount rate would be high, but at the same time we as a consumer also give more attachment to reducing the pollution with the increase in rising income. So, when our income rises, we give more weight to environmental protection. So, obviously, the discount rate on environment will be lower than GNP, and that is why the economists who always argue for high growth path for achieving the environmental sustainability, they say that since the discount rate of environmental quality is lower than the discount rate of GNP, then it is better we have to focus on, or we have to give priority to the high growth path strategy to promote better environmental conditions, and in that case we can promote rapid development of anti pollution techniques, process and product in order to reduce the pollution. Now, another graph you can see here is I have shown here social welfare or social indifference curve. W1, W2, W3, they are called social indifference curve, and these indifference curve are prepared taking two products. One is pollution, that is called bad products, that is taken on vertical axis, and growth of GNP is on horizontal axis. In economics you have studied indifference curve, but in economics when we study indifference curve, we have both good product X and Y. So, therefore, there is a trade off between these two products, but when we draw the indifference curve taking one bad product and other is the good product, then shape of the indifference curve would be like this shown in the graph W1, W2, W3, indicating that if you want to generate more pollution or if you want to consume more good product, you have to consume more bad product in order to keep the utility constant. So, your welfare throughout this indifference curve, social indifference curve will remain same, because as we move from one point to another point, that clearly indicate if we are generating more GNP, we are generating more pollution, and therefore, we are able to get the same level of welfare. That is stated by W1, W2, W3, and we also know higher the indifference curve, higher will be the level of welfare. So, when we move from W1 to W2 to W3, then welfare of the society will improve. But apart from this indifference curve, I also shown in the graph three growth path. First is OA growth path, and this growth path is intersecting or tangent at point K, and an optimum combination of pollution and GNP is identified, is determined at K point. But if we follow another growth path, that is OA dash, then we are able to achieve another equilibrium point at K dash. Now, this clearly shows that if we follow OA growth path, then society is getting welfare at point K, which is on W2, welfare indifference curve 2. But if growth path is OA dash, it indicates that growth is high, but per unit of GNP created more pollution is generated. So, that is generating more pollution in the economy by using one additional unit of GNP produced. So, obviously, now the society will move to W1 and that is a loss of welfare. So, welfare may be affected due to the different growth path. But another important argument that can be stated from this graph is that there may be possibility that instead of having positively sloped growth path with reference to GNP and pollution, there may be a condition where growth path is inversely related with pollution and GNP, and that is a key argument made by many economists that there may be possibility in any economy that we can reduce the pollution by increasing the GDP, not necessary that pollution would increase with the increase in GDP, and that is possible if we change the production methods, we change our consumption production practices, we use the technologies. For example, in India, if a major part of the GDP is coming from green sources of energy, like based on the green sources or like solar energy, and if we sustainable resources etc., then we can achieve high GDP, but not necessarily high pollution. So, that is one important argument made by economists that there may be possibility in any economy that a high growth rate of GDP may also lead to reduction in pollution. Okay. So, that I have just discussed the relationship between economic growth and environment. I would like to conclude this topic on environment and economic growth linkages. In this topic, I had discussed 4 functions of environment. Environment provides us life support system. Environment also provides natural resources which are used in the production process. Environment also absorb the different kinds of waste released by us, and environment also provides different kinds of amenity services. So, you have studied about the 4 functions or 4 activities that environment provide to the societies. You have also studied about the relationship between economic growth and environmental degradations, and also the environmental cost of economic growth. And you have studied that there may be different growth path. One growth path may be that if we are generating GDP and per unit of GDP generated is releasing more waste into the atmosphere, that growth path would not be good for the society because it will generate more pollution in the economy. But there may be a possibility that with the help of technology, change in the mode of production and using better management practices, we can reduce the pollution per unit of output produced, and there may be possibility that a high growth path may not necessarily lead to the lower environmental degradation, or high growth path may release certain kind of funds for the economy which can be used for protection of the environment. So, there is a actually both kind of situation that a high growth path may lead to environmental degradation, and a high growth path may also help to protect the environment if the growth is coming from green source of energy, clean source of energy, if we are using new technology for resource conservation. So, you have studied all these aspects while discussing the relationship between environment and economic growth. In next lecture, you will study more specifically the relationship between economic growth and environment through environmental Kuznets curve. Thank you very much.